Hello, and welcome to Films and Fandoms with Kaylee. Before I get into this episode, Navka wants to thank its sponsors, West PA Systems, the electrical design build contractor for your 21st century home and business, in Dakota, the Dubois Area Council, on the arts. Oh boy. Is this... Sorry, this episode's gonna be a bit rough to talk about, so today I'm going to be talking about Moon Knight episode 5 called Asylum. And the summary for this episode is Marc and Steven must find balance as supernatural threats ahead look to stop them. The director for this episode is Mohamed Diab, and the writers for this episode are Rebecca Kirsch, who also wrote episodes for Leverage, primarily seasons 4 and 5, or at least she's at least credited as a head writer for some episodes in season 4 and season 5, and also wrote some big Elliot episodes for season 4 and 5, and also was writer assistant for seasons 1 through 3. Season 5 she was the story editor as well, and the other writer is Matthew Orton. So yeah, because I thought it's a little bit funny when I heard when I saw Rebecca Kirsch's name, because I was like, oh, where have I heard that name before? And so I looked at her IMDb credits, and that's where I had seen that she wrote some episodes of Leverage. So, you should go ahead and watch my Leverage series I have with that, because that's chaotic, and you're probably going to need a little bit of fun chaos after this episode, because it's a lot, guys. It's a lot. So before I do get into this episode, though, I do want to issue a few trigger warnings for not only child abuse, suicide, and child death, and a bit of self-harming. So, take care of yourself when listening to this, and yeah. Alright, so we start this episode with a cave that's filling up with water, and a boy starts screaming for help, and then we see a woman in a bedroom, and she's yelling to a camera that this is all your fault. And eventually we'll find out who that boy and who that woman is. And then we cut to the Hippo Goddess, Marc, and Steven all screaming. Then it cuts to Hera's office, and we see that it's Marc is screaming, and Hera's telling him to calm down, but Marc has like tape on his nose that's like what you would put on if you had broken your nose. And Hera tells Marc that he didn't shoot him, and his mind is vacillating between sense and nonsense. At Marc clocks a elongated skull with like a circle on top. Kind of looks like a crocodile head, which makes me think that's some reference to Amit, because I think Amit has a crocodile head. And Hera explains it as is a pendulum swinging between reality, between a difficult reality, which is that Marc's a patient at Putnam Medical Facility in Chicago. Then Hera continues that a reassuring fantasy he's created on his own, and he's some kind of superhero, and he's doing everything possible to not look within. But then I suspect, even though I believe it's been confirmed that this is not Jake, I suspect he is, because Jake has more of a New York accent, and also I guess Mark might be a boxer, or it might be Jake too is a boxer. So that's the nose, or the shape on the nose. Yeah, the difference, he has a more New York accent than Mark's more typical American accent. And Mark just keeps, or I think it's Jake, actually, but as far as we know for sure, it's supposed to be Mark. So when I use Mark up to here, I'm using it in quotations, just to let you know. And basically he just keeps repeating that he's not a real doctor. And Harrow asks if that's why he keeps starting imaginary fights in the hospital. The repetition of he's not a doctor. And Harrow says he feels real and he feels like a real doctor, and Mark repeats it again. Harrow then goes along with it a bit. He says, you know what? No, this isn't about me. Let's start with you. And then they tried his way, telling him to retrace his steps. And then Harrow asks how we got there. Mark asks how Harrow got there, and Harrow says he took the bus like he always did. Harrow then asks if he wants to know what he told them when he got there, and asks what he was. It says that he was in a place that was reminiscent of the office, and it was in Egypt, and he was with the rhinoceros. Mark corrects him, saying it was a hippo. Harrow corrects himself and adds that it talked. Harrow then asks what he thinks, and asks why he thinks or if he thinks that is sense or nonsense. Which, now granted, I'm not a therapist, but I guess this could be like proof that like Mark's making it, or I don't want to say Mark's making it up because that's not what it is, and I have my own theories about what it is, but I think it does actually kind of get explained a bit more. But I feel like if you're a therapist, you should not be asking someone what they think is real or not real. Like, I don't know. That just doesn't seem right to me. Alright, so Mark continues saying it's nonsense. Mark says it's nonsense, and Harrow says he finds it encouraging, and the struggle of mind will often build places to seek shelter for different aspects of the self from our most traumatic memories, and it's called an organizing principle. And some people see castles, someone else might see a maze or a library. Mark asks, or a psych ward. Harrow says it could be, but Harrow says he finds it interesting, this new animal character. Mark says it's a hippo. Harrow says he finds it interesting, and the hippo could break down the walls between him and Steven, and they might understand. Mark's like, what? And Harrow says that before he got upset, he was talking about a boy, asking if he remembers that boy, and asks if he could tell him about that boy. Mark then leans forward and thanks him, and he's kind of like, this is where I think Jake comes into play. Or I think it's Jake, because he gets like, he like leans forward and thanks him. He's saying he's great, and then he goes to stand up. He's holding up this like glass. I think it's like a sculpture thing, but it has a pointy end, and he's like gonna stab Harrow basically, saying they must be paying him a lot to run the place. As Harrow buzzes for the nurses, and Mark continues talking, saying he's never felt so good, and he's gonna leave. Then one nurse grabs Mark as the other prepares the syringe, and Harrow starts yelling for the nurses to be gentle, as Mark's still yelling, and Harrow says he's not his enemy, and the nurse injects, it looks light brown liquid into Mark's neck. Then we get back to Mark and Steven screaming, and Steven's recovering. He's like, hippo, hippo. And Mark's like, wow, these meds are amazing. And the hippo asks Steven if Mark's always so intense. And Steven's like, yeah, Hippo asks if Mark and Steven are twins. Mark says they aren't, but Steven says they sort of are. And the Hippo says that's great, and it's cleared up the whole situation up for her. Mark says that makes two of them because just a second ago he thought he'd been shot to death. The Hippo says this will really bake your noodle, but she thinks he's taken a little time out and they are actually dead. Mark, I'm sorry, what? And Steven says they are, and he thinks she's right. And the Hippo says to hold on a second, it's been a minute since they've had a soul pass through here. She then pulls out like papyrus cards and is looking through them. She finds one. Sorry. She finds the right card and then like turns it around, which I do actually remember reading this in history class, that ancient Egyptians and around that time period they would use papyrus as paper, and it was actually kind of cool how they made used the papyrus to make the paper. And they actually also used to record information on stone, called cuneiform, or I may be confusing a couple things, but also I think it's cuneiform because I remember learning about that in in middle school, but it was cool to kind of learn about that, which actually kind of started my love of history. Which is why this series is so cool, because then I'm like, oh, I recognize that name. Because we're about to get into a lot of mythology. So, which is actually something I'm going to bring up here in a few moments. And the panromantic asexual woman, I am kind of tired of like seeing the only like stories featuring LGBTQ characters. The characters either end up dead, like Supernatural, they had set up its main gay ship and they made it canon by having Castiel confess his love to Dean. And yes, it was romantic, not brotherly. Don't argue with me on that. And then having him sent to like super hell, whereas like after a character, like after he was finally able to confess his love, he ends up dead. And I know recently, with killing Eve, and I guess this is a spoiler for the Killing Eve series finale, is after the two characters are finally happy, one ends up dead and ends up falling in water and gets shot by a sniper. Like, and even like all the other stories featuring LGBTQ characters are usually involve like something with coming out. And like, yeah, those like stories are bad, but are those really the only stories that people can come up with? Like, and I know there are people who probably have created stories where a character, or like where a character just happens to be, but like now that I'm thinking about it, I should say that when I say that like a character like just happens to be a minority and it doesn't affect the plot, and what I mean by that is I do understand that sometimes like you do like the or the character, whether it's like their religion or their race or gender or sexual identity and ethnicity do affect the story because they have different experiences. And like, but if who a character isn't relevant to the plot, then there's no reason why a character can't be that and have a good story. So, yeah, I guess that's just my thoughts, and I hope I didn't use any of the wrong language to talk about these. But, yeah. Alright, so, just continuing on with my final thoughts. This episode was rough. I am not gonna lie. And I am a little sad that the next episode, episode 6, will be the last episode of Moon Knight, because I feel like there's so much more that like can be done with Marc and Steven, and like with Layla and their dynamic, and like with Bushman, because I don't know if it's ever said if I don't think Bushman's dead. So I'm wondering if we're gonna see Bushman in the season finale, because the season finale, somehow Marc and Steven have to, or somehow they have to save Marc or save Steven. Marc has to get out of the fields of reeds, get word to Layla, free Khonshu, then get back to the world so they can heal, and then stop Harrow. Because I don't know if they're going to be able to like bring everybody back. That was judged early. So I don't know if like all the souls coming in that were condemned early, if those were supposed to be, or if that was like Harrow pulling the trigger on it already, which makes me wonder where Layla is. Because I mean, it could be possible that Layla has dragged their body out of the cave and is like trying to like bring him back, but Marc and Steven are dead, so I don't know what Layla's done. Like, she just left the body there and like gone off, or what that was, or like what's going on there, because we know she was in the room when Marc got shot, and we have no idea what happened after that. So I hope Layla's alive, and I kind of hope we find, like, there's so many like storylines that could be, there's still like plot points that need to be resolved, because you have like, it's like somehow with the like this next episode they have to get Steven out, or they have to bring Steven back, get Marc out of the field of reeds, free Khonshu, tell us where Layla is, tell us where Harrow is, somehow stop Harrow, and maybe deal with the Bushman storyline or the Bushman plot point, because you can't have like Mark saying like I started working for my old CO. I started doing work for hire under my old CO Bushman, and he was the one who, and he wanted he wanted to raid this dig site, or wanted to raid this Egyptian tomb, and it was him that killed all the hostages, and it was him that killed Layla's father, and he shot me too. And you can't have like that, like need for revenge, because I mean, if someone shot me, I'd want them to pay. So I don't know if Bushman's involved. I mean it's possible Bushman might be involved. Harris got to get his information somehow, right? And who would know more about Mark than his old CO? So, I mean, there's not exactly evidence to prove that he isn't. So, yeah, this next episode's probably going to be even more crazy. And I can't wait to talk about it, because, well, it's going to be quite interesting. Sorry, this episode kind of was all over the place. I do hope you like it. Alright. Thank you so much for listening. To learn more about NAFCO, you can head over to nafco.org and follow us on our socials, linked in the website, to learn more about our sponsors. And you can also go into the episode description to go to my website, where you can see all the other projects I'm working on. And you could also go on nafco.org to support the podcast and donate and follow us on our socials. So, yeah. The next episode, I will be probably starting... Actually, I haven't decided what the next episode's gonna be. Actually, no, that's a lie. Next time you will see me, I will be talking about... next time you hear me, sorry, I will be talking about episode 6 of Moon Knight. And after that, I will decide what series I'm going to do next. So, thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.